Уважаемые коллеги,
Dear colleagues, good afternoon again. We're starting a series of our afternoon panel sessions, and I would like to thank everyone for being with us today. We are going to have an exciting discussion on the strategy of the cybersecurity of the financial industry. And I would like to invite our speakers, our panelists, Georgy Luntovsky, the President of the Association of Banks of Russia, Daniela Zezic, CSO and DPO of Eurobank, Mikhail Alexeyev, Chairman of the Management Board of UniCredit Bank of Russia, and Sunil Seshadri, Chief Information Security Officer and Senior Vice President of Visa. Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen, once again. I would like to say that we are all responsible for the same thing. We are ensuring the security of our customers, our payment systems, or our financial institutions, and we obviously understand very well that financial organizations today and tomorrow and in the nearest future are going to remain the #1 target for cybercriminals. Now, obviously, we understand that money is something that cybercriminals are most interested in, and we understand that there is diverse experience in this area. Large companies, large loan and lending organizations are focusing on that area. Payment systems, including Visa company, really is a showcase of cybersecurity for the global community, because you have a very high level of cyber resilience. But there are other examples. These are examples when we still have the magnet tape cards. In some countries still lack rules and standards. Sometimes customers of small or medium-sized lending organizations suffer a lot from cyber fraud. And I would really today focus, during my first series of questions, I would focus on your strategies. Could you tell us about your strategy? I mean, obviously you have a model of threat in your strategies, and each of you is analyzing different models of threats, and based on this unique analysis, you build your own strategies, your own rules. What are these rules and strategies? So the first question is for all the panelists. And I think that I would like to first ask this question to Senior Vice President of Visa, Mr. Seshadri. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Stanislav, and thank you for having me here. So, from a Visa perspective, I should give you a lens into Visa as a company. We have issued the part of the network that we have. We have issued about 3.3 billion payment cards in the global economy. We deal with about 45 million merchants that accept us at a point of sale. There are about 16,000 nearly financial institutions that issue the Visa branded cards. On a given year, we transact about 188 billion transactions valued on a payment volume of about $11 trillion. So, given those aspects, and with that, there is about 20% of global consumer spend that happens on Visa's technology. So, those are the ingredients that we have to operate with. And there are no room for big mistakes, because we have an impact of magnitude when we have issues in the cybersecurity space. With that said, from a threat perspective, we by and large see most things under the sun. The threats of the past continues to exist as we move into the future, just with a level of complexity and scale. So the things that we worry about, that we defend every single day, is we see typically in the ecosystem, the financial industry sees about accounts being compromised. And this happens, you and I are creatures of passwords. We all reuse passwords how much ever we like or don't like. And when the bad guys get access to these large hatch passwords, we've seen them reuse it back into the financial systems. That's one area. Second thing is patches. Patches continue to be sort of the bane of our lives. As long as we use technology systems, patches are relentless, it's unforgiving, it's every single day that we need to keep on top of. Third things that we see is the rise of sophisticated malware attacks, where typical traditional signature-based technologies are just not good enough anymore in the ecosystem. Then we see the advent of DDoS attacks. What used to be a nuisance about 2, 3, 5 years ago in the past, now we see attacks coming in with magnitude. I think in the last session we heard about the Mirai botnet. When you have attacks over 1 terabit per second worth of sustained volumetric attack, we need to think about the strategies that we need to have in place as to how do you defend yourself against sustained volumetric attacks that is multiple times than what your network allows for. So these are some of the aspects of what we see. Then perhaps the fifth thing I would say is API level attacks, application programming level attacks all continue to be on the rise in the ecosystem. This is a bit of a newer trend because protecting APIs are slightly different from the attacks that we have seen in the past. I'll pause there.
Thank you very much. I would like to address my question, the same question to you, Daniela. I would like to say that, well, I think that our colleague from Visa company was very right to point out the DDoS attacks and API attacks and application attacks, but we think that in Russia there is at least one trend, new emerging trend, is the focus on attack on personal data. What do you think are the most dangerous threats here? How do you develop your strategies and what rules would you need to fight cybercriminals? Thank you.
Thank you. Our strategy is to reduce our exposure to current and future attacks by training people, processes, and use advanced technology. We continue to invest all our efforts and intelligence to ensure a safe and secure banking environment and maintain a balance between security and business innovation. In order to effectively allocate resources and prioritize our efforts to address those threats, vulnerabilities, and consequences of those cyber activities, we've analyzed the global cybersecurity landscape and associated risk at the strategic level. So key priorities for are assess evolving cyber risks, detect vulnerabilities of all our resources, patch those vulnerabilities in order to protect our assets, detect and respond to incident in appropriate time, and strengthen our cybersecurity awareness culture. In our region, we didn't face such a volumetric attacks, but what is the most important topic these days is regulation in data protection and latest trends related to data privacy and massive data breaches detected around the world. Latest data leaks happen in the well-known companies these days investing a lot in security, shown that to us that traditional security strategy cannot protect us against targeted and those advanced threats. So we have to be more agile and to collaborate and to prevent such attacks on different levels.
Спасибо.
Thank you. I would like to return to you, Sunil. The problem of data leaks, is it relevant for you? Is it a threat for a Visa company?
We have a very healthy level of paranoia in protecting consumer non-public information. And the strategy that we adopt is, broadly, we use the term defense in depth architecture in terms of protecting that data. For us, data is everything. Everything else is peripheral, ancillary to that information. And the defense in depth architecture is laid out in a way such that there are multiple preventive and detective and monitoring solutions across the stack, from the perimeter to the network, to the application, to the operating system, to the database, to the data itself. And there are multiple layers of solutions that we deploy and that are largely preventive, but some are monitoring detective in nature. And the philosophy that we adopt from a strategic standpoint is devaluing data. Because we know in any good company you go to, people will make mistakes. Software will come with bugs, whether we like it or not, how much of a diligence that we do behind it. Hardware will crash every now and then. When these things happen in the realm of cybersecurity, we need to ensure that data is unusable to unauthorized parties if and when there is a hack or a breach. And the strategy that we have is devalue the data. Either devalue through tokenization, devalue through multiple ways of encrypting the data. So this way, in that very, very low eventuality of a potential breach, the data is useless to the bad guys, as long as we ensure that our sound key management practices that we adopt in terms of how we protect it. This approach has largely worked well. What we are adding to that equation is all of the applied AI, the neural networks, building on more cognitive sort of artificial intelligence products to ensure we are able to say when anomalies happen in the environment. So broadly, so data does matter. I think the strategy largely applies to, I would think, most companies.
Thank you so much. Mr. Luntovsky, question to you. I know that the Association of Banks of Russia, under your leadership, started to focus on cyber threats and cyber risks. And you are preparing a set of measures to manage some of these risks and to fine-tune some of the approaches on countering them. What are the problems in Russia? What are the problems that are relevant for the Russian financial industries in terms of fighting cybercrime and increase in cyber resiliency?
Thank you, Stanislav Konstantinovich. Thank you all, colleagues, participants that came to this forum. I hope that it is the launch of a good tradition, and every year we will be able to meet and exchange experience. As for the banking system, our association indeed unites the banks with assets in excess of 80% of the nation's banking system. We established the relevant committee on cybersecurity that is actually led by you, the Mr. Stanislav Kuznetsov, that's sitting right next to me. Actually, the threats that are encountered by the banking systems, they have been aired here. I will not repeat myself. The banking system is not uniform. We have leading banks, and they have both the financial resources and the intellectual resources to develop the new technologies, to implement the modern defenses. And Sberbank, that is the organizer of this forum, is one of such leaders in the financial system of the Russian Federation. They are a leader in developing cyber defenses. Now, I did mention that the banking system is not uniform. We have this category of banks that have basic licenses. Last year, they ran a profit of about 5 million rubles each. We understand, quite obviously, that they cannot be as heavily involved in protecting information as major banks. And the mission of the association, as we see it, is about uniting efforts, is about transferring some capability from the major banks and some knowledge from the regulator to support these smaller players. And on the initiative of the developers, and one of those is BIZON, the Safe Information Security Zone, we launched a pilot project in 2018 to develop an information exchange platform. This platform is able to unite both commercial banks and other financial institutions and other institutions that have the right information. We get the information from 26 sources. It's quite relevant. For the members of the association, the basic membership of this platform is actually free. And I think today this is one of the good examples of businesses, of corporate actors uniting against the relevant threats. And our strategy is to unite the business, to unite corporate actors, and use the capabilities of major banks, and use the knowledge of the regulators that is, again, actively involved in all the processes, and is also involved in this platform, FinCert. This is a unique ability to unite the efforts and counter those cyber threats. Thank you, Mr. Lentovsky. Mikhail, I would now like to address the same questions to you. You are the chief executive of one of the major banks in the Russian Federation. You are a systemic bank in Russia. And you do have a unique experience. UniCredit has a standing in Russia, but then you also have the obligation to follow the best practices, the methodologies, and all the other standards that your colleagues abroad have. So what threats keep you awake at night? What standards and rules do you need to manage cyber risks? Thank you, Stanislav Konstantinovich. First of all, I would need to say that just like our colleagues, we encounter most of the threats out there. I was following pretty closely the things that have been said at the morning session, and it was said with great justice that if cyber attacks bring down a nuclear reactor, a hospital, or a plane, this is certainly immeasurably greater a calamity than the things that we might encounter in the financial sector. This is not a statement to be challenged. But at the end of the day, the malfeasance that are only interested in bringing down planes and causing other human disasters, they are not that numerous, those guys. People are mostly interested in money. You said with a lot of justice that 70% of cybercrime is committed in the financial sphere. In Russia, over the past 12 months, 4 billion cyber attacks were registered. I mean, you can treat these figures as you may wish. The threat to the financial sector is assessed to be at about $2 trillion, and we are pretty much at the cutting edge of this. And this is the actual war. And a war is won by whoever is one step ahead. If you are responding actively to what has already happened, you will always be losing. I think the main strategy of any financial institution, any credit institution, should be to foresee the potential trends and to build up the defenses in advance. As much as it can be done, we should be one step ahead. This obviously does require information exchange and learning best practices, because if you learn on someone else's errors, you are certainly the wiser. And the second element of success, the second element of a successful strategy is obviously money. Everything must be paid for. According to research, about 7% of all expenses are the money spent on information security. We don't think this is a sufficient amount. We are trying to aim more than the industry's average, and this has been giving good fruit. Over the past 5 years, we have not lost a single ruble to cybercrime. This drive to project and rebuild our budgets accordingly. And the third point that I would like to bring up is we obviously have to remember the human weaknesses, those treacherous social engineering tricks where you can spoof a phone call from a credit institution. Malfeasance assume the identities of security officers or customer relations officers, but customers are protected. Now, as we are speaking with our colleagues, we see a trend where malfeasants are trying to emulate the actions of the credit institution's leadership with respect to the rank-and-file employees of the credit institution. I mean, an employee can get instructions from, purportedly, from the CEO to send funds somewhere. And of course, the CEO never gave any instructions of any sort like this. Voice can be emulated, visualization can be emulated. It's all about working with people. And I'm just wrapping up. You know, I've seen studies that say that people don't change. About 20% of passwords in the world start with those same figures, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No matter how much we inform our customers and our employees, even though they know that they might fall victim to fraud, to cybercrime, people do exhibit insouciance. People do behave nonchalantly. We do need to work with both our colleagues in the industry and our customers and our counterparties. We need to make sure that they are prepared. I mean, preparedness is still a relevant slogan. Mikhail, I do agree with you that in the past 12 to 18 months, systemic banks in Russia did a lot of work to strengthen their security, their cybersecurity. And on the whole, you can say that in Russia there's a certain breaking point being reached or having been reached, the banks have become more secure, more resilient. That did happen due to the efforts of our legislators, our regulator. Additional measures have been taken. The banks have become more aware. And statistics are duly corroborating these statements. The losses of banks from direct attacks of cybercriminals have gone down sharply. But then there's another risk, a new one. Fraudsters started trying to get the information through employees of the bank. Have you encountered anything of the sort? I mean, just trying to talk people into giving information, trying to get some information out of people through phishing emails, or perhaps, other methods, social engineering. Have you encountered any examples that do cause alarm? Well, yes, malfeasance, malicious actors are trying to approach employees from various credit institutions. They are trying to turn employees into their assets. We are following closely publications in the media, and we see that a lot of databases, thankfully not ours, but databases of our credit institutions, have been made available publicly. This problem, yes, is indeed there, but there's nothing else to be done other than working with your human resources, selecting them, running the propaganda among them, and raising the awareness on the part of your employees and customers. It's just the work that needs to be compared, and you need to take this work on a new level, on a new systemic level. The human factor does remain the core vulnerability. I know that some banks have introduced this norm in their contracts with their employees, that they cannot take pictures of their screens. Have you tried doing anything of the sort? Well, I can actually tell you even more. We are taking a pretty negative view on taking pictures inside the bank, if this is related one way or another to any potential threats. If it's money that someone is trying to take pictures, you can use geolocation to understand how much funds are there. And taking pictures of screens, yes, this is beyond the good and evil. Everyone has been advised that this must not be done. We have taken a negative stance on that, yes. Thank you, Mikhail. That's very important because you're one of the best photographers in our nation. Well, the most important thing in a photographer's job is knowing where to stop. Yeah, perhaps. Okay, colleagues, let's take another track. If on the whole we are noting the need to improve the rules and standards, but the systemically important banks have learned to protect themselves against cyber attacks, it is a completely different trend on the part of the customers of these banks. We have been noting that cybercriminals have been playing much more to the weaknesses of these customers, and in Russia there's a rising trend of social engineering. Social engineering is becoming more rife. Many experts ascribe this to the low cyber literacy levels. Some put this down to the unwillingness to follow the rules that a lot of banks put into the small print. We actually did a small survey among the customers of different banks, and I would like to now put a small video about how customers respond to elementary, very basic banking rules. Can we have it on? Yeah. Could you explain the meaning of the term cybersecurity? Cyber what? This is the process of defending against hacker attacks. What cyber fraud schemes do you know? Writing funds off credit cards? Well, you can follow the advertising. Where do you download the applications from? They are somehow on the phone already. From the web. What do you not do from the publicly available Wi-Fi? What is in common between CVV and CVC? It's something behind on the card. You don't tell it to anyone. What should a good password comprise? Letters, caps, low level? How many characters are there in your password? Various answers. What is a two-factor authentication? Two-factor authentication? Well, I can't really pronounce that. Have you ever become a victim of internet fraud? You can follow a survey and get some money for this. I did that twice, yes. Some people introduce themselves as our relatives. Yeah, unfortunately, yes. 80% of the cases of cyber fraud in Russia are using social engineering. 80% of social engineering. 80% of fraud in Russia is social engineering. Thank you very much. Mr. Sushadri, I would like to put the question to you. Are you satisfied with the level of cyber literacy on the part of your customers? If no, what makes you unhappy? What should be done as a first priority?
That's a hard question. I don't think there is a point in time we will have where enough literacy on cybersecurity is enough. That said, my personal view is we're not going to make the entire consumer community cybersecurity experts either. We think there is a solution to a large extent at the back end on the technology side. And you have to forgive me with my answers because I'm a technologist, so I will give you a flavor of what the art of the possible can be with what technology can do. So in the example of whether it's a phishing attack or in the example of where passwords are compromised, what if I told you today, if every person in this room had my user ID and the password and had access to my computer, when it's time for authenticating with that credentials, we can deny everyone in the room except me. Even though you have the user ID and a password, and even though if you have access to my laptop, we can do this today with how we are applying artificial intelligence into the systems, where closer to about nearly a 99% efficacy rate, we are able to say how people type. We are able to process the signal and say the frequency at which you move your keystroke, the pressure you apply on the keystrokes, the way you move your mouse, the way you use a touchpad, they all leave enough distinct attributes that we are able to discern from a non-repudiation standpoint, who's the legitimate user versus who is everybody else. This platform needs to grow. There has to be a lot more that needs to be done in terms of being able to process that intelligence at the back end. So the technology in me tells me controls and security is not left to the goodness or the heart of individuals. It's systematic, it's automated, it's got to be enforced by a back-end set of technology platforms. That is one way I think we can keep up with the surge in the kind of attacks that we see today. A little controversial, perhaps, but that's a point of view.
Спасибо большое. Михаил, я знаю, что вы направляете...
Well, I know, sir, that you actually send some instructions, some notifications to your customers that are one way or another related to cyber literacy improvement. Mikhail, what do you think are the most important steps that we should all make in this direction? You know, from the standpoint of the financial industry, because customers are the most important thing. You know, Stanislav Konstantinovich, it's all probably not about just notifying customers. You know, speaking from experience of other institutions, that might not be sufficient. We all know that we should live a healthy lifestyle. We should, you know, watch what we eat, but not all the people do follow that. But, I mean, the same goes for cybersecurity. You all know that you can be called by a cyber fraudster, but if that cyber fraudster addresses you, people find themselves hypnotized. It's like they are facing a snake with its purported hypnotic powers. I mean, I can tell you all those, I can recount all those stories. And obviously spoofing calls comes in, and then that is obviously a fraudster, but then another guy calls that is definitely a security officer in all his manifestations, and then another guy is calling that is representing himself to be a law enforcement officer, and that is the actual fraudster. These are very sophisticated social engineering methods. I'm not going to tell you all about those, but you only fight the like with the like. Against the social engineering methods, we should use social engineering to educate people. And at certain points, we do need to use electronic assistance. Those will have to help customers identify fraudulent calls. And as people talk to actual customer service representatives or purported customer service representatives, i.e. fraudsters, you know, AI should help. People should have digital assistants, virtual assistants, who would give them confidence that the opposite number they are speaking to are actually legitimate.
So, like, this one source of information is not enough, and there is some room for improvement in this promising area. Yes, I totally agree with you. We need some other methods so that everyone is aware about the level of the risk. You know, I've recently understood that there is this paradox, because some of our colleagues require the laws to be harsher, the punishments to be harsher. And Finland, with quite a liberal legal system on one hand, on the other hand, 90% of all transactions are cashless, has a very low level of cybercriminality. Many experts say it is because of high level of cyber literacy and cyber culture. Daniel, I would like to ask you about your region. You, as an expert, are you satisfied with the level of cyber literacy and cyber culture of your customers?
In Serbia, we don't have enough security experts at all. So we don't have also enough social engineers. And we didn't detect any attack and incident in our country and in the region where our clients were victims of callings and direct access to those social engineers. The main vector of those threats are phishing mails. So we are trying to to work with our clients, and we inform them upon detection of some significant campaign that is detected in our region. Also, we collaborate with our Association of Serbian Banks, and we are creating many campaigns, and also with the Ministry of Interior. So we try to make awareness of our people globally on the country level and internally on our banks level as well.
Thank you very much. But you know, we are at the start of our discussion, we said that actually cyber criminals do not know borders. Wherever you are, you can attack any resources. And on the other hand, the national borders impede us from collaborating with each other and to share the information, to share significantly important and critical information that would help our countries to better address cybercrime. I'd like to ask a question to you, Mr. Lentovsky. What is the most, how can we improve the level of cooperation on a national level and on international level too? Because I know that the Association of Banks of Russia has a lot of, has many relations built with the colleagues of other countries. Usually officials, it's very hard for officials to actually, you know, agree on something in this area. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Kuznetsov. Just a few words about cyber literacy. First of all, I'm not at all satisfied with my level of cyber literacy. I'm not even talking about some people I meet, and these are the people of my generation that are sometimes ignorant of the situation. They do not know what's going on when someone calls them or when they receive this or that message. At the same time, the IB Criminalistic Lab made a research, and they think that more than 70% of Russian banks are not ready to address potential cyber risks. That really testifies and really talks about the situations. Yeah, so Ilya Sachkov, the CEO of IB company, is here, so he might comment on that statistics. Yeah, it might be possible. But anyway, just in a nutshell, I would like to say that the cyber hygiene, cyber literacy, raising awareness, you know, all these issues should be on the agenda, even within the banks, even within some institutions. And talking about the international cooperation and talking about the borders that basically divide us. Well, on an optimistic note, I would like to say our booth was visited by two representatives of two international countries that said that they are ready to connect to our platform. So, but this is only the start. We tried, and I think we succeeded, to unite the efforts within the country, the efforts of commercial banks and the services that raise awareness in terms of cyber risks. We were able to attract and bring other organizations, including telecom carriers, to join all the efforts and to withstand cyber threats. As for the international contacts, we recently have been to Germany and Italy. In the Association of the Commercial Banks, we presented our platform. But in Italy, for instance, they said that they have a similar platform. So we had a good discussion in Germany as well as in Italy. But then we went back to our homes, and, you know, I have the feeling that they were being told that they should wait for a while, you know. It's not the time now. Yes, well, you are not the one who feels that. Yes, because we go home after all these conferences, we have these political things, and it just all dies off and whistles off. Yes, actually, it is a major problem. Thank you so much, Mr. Lontovsky. Before going to the Q&A sessions, and perhaps our colleagues should prepare the microphones, I would like you to vote. You have this remote control for voting, and based on the discussion that we have, that we had now, following the discussion, I would like to ask this question to the audience: what is the first thing that the banks and lending organizations should do to achieve a better level of cyber resilience? Some say that the answer is the protection of IT systems. The second position is that we need to protect customers better, to invest more resources in that. And there is an understanding that we need more collaboration. We lack collaboration. That's the third answer. So could I please have the voting mode on, and please press the button on your remote voting device.
Так, сейчас мы увидим.
So now we're going to see the results of the voting. Now, what is the priority problem that we should address? Okay, so I'd like to remind you once again that that you would need microphones. The audience would need microphones. So the audience voted for customers, because protection of customers and caring for customers is one of the major tasks of lending organizations. After that, we have the protection of IT systems, and on the third place, we have the answer of improving collaboration. To be honest, I actually voted for collaboration. I voted for cooperation and for creating such tools that would help us to radically and dramatically improve the situation. Mikhail, could you please comment on your vote? Well, actually, I abstained because I was interested in learning what my colleagues think. But just a few words about what I think about that. Well, first of all, the question is provocative. I think that all elements of all these three elements are very important, and you need everything, really everything, all the three elements. And I would like to support you that, yes, collaboration is a critical element, because before you protect anything, you need to understand what will be your future problem, what you might encounter in the future. But I think there are other things that you can add to this list, and I see another very important element that you could add to that list. Sometimes we, and I'm talking about IT industry, are the sources of the problems that we generate for ourselves, basically. There is a book, Murphy Law, and it says that the security systems basically kills all the other systems. And the suppliers of the major operational systems and software products sometimes change the releases of the system so often, so that they basically give us, sell us these solutions that need patches or need some new versions. And these are raw software solutions. And there are bugs, there are security flaws, and perhaps it's the businesses. I mean, it's the business. It is the business, yes, but those who are the vendors of the basic IT solutions, and we're talking about the largest global companies, guys, perhaps you need to slow down a bit. Yes, the progress is there, you cannot stop it, but I think that some of our colleagues went a bit too far. And sometimes you do want some more stability, because more stability means more security. And you need to focus on that too. And when we talk about collaboration and information sharing, and, you know, I would like to kind of send this signal. Aren't we too often change the basic operation systems on our consumer level computers and our corporate IT systems. I mean, you should be a little bit more loyal to us, meaning customers. Okay, thank you. So please, questions. Please introduce yourself and address your question to one or several panelists. Good afternoon. My name is Dmitry Kashtanov. I am from constitute Group company from Ukraine. So I have a question to all speakers. When Telegram Messenger will launch its cryptocurrency, there is a possibility that the banking structure, the banking system will lose some of its positions. Do you think it might be the real reason why Telegram was blocked in many countries? And you, as representatives of banking culture, banking structures, do you see it as a threat of losing your customers? Thank you. Okay, who's going to answer that? Colleagues? Mikhail, perhaps you should answer. Well, cryptocurrencies, it's inevitable they're going to emerge, and it's not only Telegram that is going to develop these cryptocurrency solutions. There will be other entities who will do that. The question, we're talking about some kind of an augmented financial system, some additional financial system. What would our regulators say about that? That's the major question, and I think that this question is still open. We hear some messages that some of these initiatives would be blocked. Whether this position is going to be put in a legal framework and in a technical framework, well, we don't know. We're going to see that. So, yes, there is this trend, we can see it, but it's only emerging, it's only started. Okay, Mr. Seshadri, do you think that Telegram could be a competitor of Visa?
From my perspective, I'm not a big believer in cryptocurrency. I'm a big believer in the underlying technology of blockchain. For cryptocurrency to make its way, you need essentially someone to underwrite it. And today, the volatility and the fluidity of how these bitcoins work is so volatile, it's hard to make sense out of it in terms of how it gets monetized over a period of time. So until a point in time, countries start underwriting, the judiciary system starts regulating the currency, I think we are far too away. But the blockchain technology has a great deal of promise across just various different aspects.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for your question. I do hope that you are satisfied with the answer. Let's give some of the other participants the opportunity to ask a question. Yes, thank you for your answer. Yes, please. Okay, second row. Please, quick question, quick answer. Good morning. I'm from Sevastopol State University. My name is Vladislav. I have the following question. Neural networks and their impact on identifying customers and employee and management relations, there might be some gaps here. I mean, neural networks are very developed right now, and you can generate any problems, any cyber security problems in the financial industry. How do banks monitor that? Well, thank you so much, colleagues. If anyone would volunteer to answer that, please raise your hand. I think that the neural networks would not really address the deviations that you talked about. I think it is a promising thing, and many lending institutions researching that. they try to research some new methods of improving the level of authentication. And you saw in the video that the two-factor authentication might be a good answer. You might use some biometrics with your fingerprints, with your palm, with your face or eye. You can authenticate in the systems using that. And there are some differences in terms of in terms of the voice. And some can identify a person by the way he or she types on the keyboard. The recent researchers say that you can understand how a person looks like and what age he or she is based on voice only. And all these measures would help to protect the customers, to improve the level of authentication. And the overwhelming majority of the crimes means where are the crimes when you authorize as a customer, when criminals authorize themselves as a customers and steal money, basically. And here, all these solutions really maximize the authentication barriers for the criminals, and this is good. Mikhail, perhaps you would build on that? Well, if you know the reality of our markets, some guarantee, counterfeit, false guarantee with some signature that has nothing to do with the real signature of a person who issues these guarantees is a very popular crime among the fraudsters. And it's a very easy thing that actually works sometimes. So neural networks is our future. As Mr. Kuznetsov pointed, the use of these technologies help to better identify customers and help better understand what's the situation with the customer. And now some static photos can be simulated. I mean, they can be generated, and the recordings of voice, the voice recordings can be simulated, and this voice would really be like a person's voice, some customer's voice. And, you know, fingerprint, face recognition and eye recognition technologies are the biometric solutions that might protect us, although these factors might become yet another threat for our customers. So it is always a competition, a technology competition, and those who are one step ahead, those who are better, would leverage these technologies, especially the technologies related to neural networks. And those who take advantage of these technologies would have this competitive edge. I think it is the nearest future, yes. And those who are responsible for cybersecurity should really focus on these new solutions. Yes, and I would like to add that you need to protect all that really in a really good way, because all these are personal data that the banks should store in a secure way.
I would agree with my colleagues. I think neural networks and deep learning models are the way the authentication of the future is going to look like. Because one of the things we are challenged with from a technology standpoint is how do you create less friction for the consumers? Because it's easy to deploy secondary factor, third factor, fourth factor worth of authentication, but you will see consumers trying to get away from your system when you add that much of step-up authentication involved. But when you build neural networks alongside other deep learning models, you can understand from a behavioral standpoint who the real consumer is and what is the right level of authentication you want to have for him or her. Then the step-up authentication comes in only when you don't have 100% certainty of who the authenticator is. So you can build these programs only to step up or down, but just based, not for all, but based on a case-by-case basis. And deep learning models, applied AI programs are a core foundation to how we think about it from Visa.
Yes, thank you very much. There were other questions. I saw a hand here. Yes, please.
Albania from Deutsche Bank here in Russia. We heard a lot of techniques, implementation methods, AI, neural networks, but the truth of the matter is that most of our time and effort in banks we spend on ensuring compliance to regulatory requirements, the minimum standards, etc. And I like the point that Mr. Luntovsky made earlier about we have such diverse banks, small, big, super big, and the truth is that the regulatory bodies all around the world, they make their laws in one way for all the banks. And they go from very generic framework all the way to detailed implementation at the technical layer. And my question is, looking at all the things that we've been saying, what is your suggestion to ensure that now we also start getting the regulatory bodies in alignment with what the single banks need? Maybe what a big bank needs is not what the small bank needs, and maybe not what the regulator said you need to have in place. And it starts from technology to operations. So my question is, what do you suggest is the best way forward? Maybe through dialogues, through the associations, potentially? Thank you very much.
Я уверен, что этот вопрос.
I am sure that this is the question for Mr. Luntovsky. Yes, thank you. There is this problem, I do agree with you, and I would like to remind you that from the 1st of January 2019, we have a law that came into effect, the law on proportionate regulation. Now there are banks with a basic license, with a capital from 300 million to 1 billion rubles, banks with universal licenses, and system-wide systemic important banks. And obviously, they have different capabilities because, as I told before, the basic licensed banks, they had 5 million rubles. That's the average net profit. And obviously, these banks are interested in driving down costs. I would like to say that, yes, we have cooperation. The regulators understand the issue. Many times we have discussed the possibility of deregulating and driving down the regulatory pressure and ensuring the cybersecurity for these banks. I mean, talking about the small banks, of course, first of all. The regulators understand this issue. Perhaps not all of the issues were addressed now, but we are moving in that direction. And I would like to underline once again, a regulator understands the problem. So the association is the platform where you need to come with your questions, with your problems, and you'll be able to discuss all that. And you can prepare your own suggestions for the regulator. As far as I know, the association is basically now collecting all the suggestions and problems and giving it all to the regulator. In a summarized form. Yes, the last question, please.
Всем добрый день, Александр.
Alexander Gendelov, Copylink Company. Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Kuznetsov, I was a participant of a panel discussion at the Cybersecurity International Forum that you moderated, where we discussed the problem of a global protection of all types of data. Now, I have this question for all panelists. Today, we are discussing the cybersecurity strategy for financial industry. That's quite a specific thing, but the problem is more generic, really, because it presents in all other businesses. There is a public services portal, there are healthcare, patient data problems, and other things. Now, do you think that we need to look at cybersecurity only from the financial industry perspective, or we should look at it more globally? I think that Mr. Luntovsky said about cyber hygiene term. Perhaps we need to create this kind of a surgeon general across on the national level who would regulate that cybersecurity issues. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is a very important question. And I would like to say that on this Congress, we discuss all areas. On this panel, we discuss financial industry. Some other panels discuss critical infrastructure, In some other halls, the panelists discuss the cooperation with law enforcement agencies. We are also discussing the issues of implementation of modern technologies in various areas of our lives. And the digital economy program is focused on precisely that. But this is a very, very important question. Who is going to be accountable for all that? Well, I won't be able to have a full answer for that, but I would put it in the following manner. You cannot only talk about the financial industry. Mr. Kuznetsov asked the question, how are we going to protect customers? And customers are the companies that provide these or that services. And the criminals can use unprotected customers to enter the system. That's the first thing. Second, many banks, especially large banks, are creating their own ecosystems that include not only financial organizations, but this ecosystem can deliver various services from various diverse companies. This is why I think we need a comprehensive strategy to improve cybersecurity in general. For instance, we all use telecom networks, and currently the equipment, the mobile telecom equipment is worn off. Is the level of its use is like 60%. It has worked out 60% of its capacity, and it is updated with the rate of 6%. And this might be a problem too. So we need to focus on improving general cybersecurity, improving fixed assets too. And actually, the digital economy program addresses all the issues, including this one. I think this is a very good question, and I might answer in the following way. Banks are target number one, so they're spearheading the developments in this area, and the results of these researches, the results of the experience of the banks can be used in other industries and can be really serve as an example on how to improve cybersecurity in other industries. Please, Mikhail. Yes, I think that you made a very right question. I think that financial industries and all other industries have many things in common. We have basically the same issues in terms of cybersecurity. For instance, when a telephone number is emulated and there is a call from an attacker, this weapon can be used in the financial industry, in banking industry, and in all other industries. If we initiate, unfortunately we haven't done that before, if we criminalize these emulation of the telephone numbers, it would be good, not only for the banking industry, but for other industries as well. But there are many general things, but there are specific things too. Where you have money and money relations and money flows, you have a special situation, as Mr. Lutovsky put it. Yes, we are moving in the direction of creating ecosystems, and without the creation of a strategy of cybersecurity in the financial and or banking industry, we cannot move further. It should be a part of the general cybersecurity strategy that would span across all other systems and industries. Well, colleagues, we should wrap up. Sorry for those who were not able to ask any questions. We're going to be present here, nevertheless, for 2 days. So we will be open for any questions. Unfortunately, the time is up. I would like to address our panelists, address our colleagues, and to ask perhaps the conclusion, the last question. Perhaps in one word. What is the most important thing that we need to do to increase the resilience, cyber resilience in financial industry? And let's start with you, Sunil, please.
My view is cybersecurity is what I call as the ultimate team sport. It's fluid, it's dynamic, it's constantly changing, and it's not specific to any one vertical. The one thing that has helped me at Visa is making cybersecurity a core part of the company's strategy at a CEO level. When you do that, it's incredible as to how you build that culture of security from the top down, because the CEO needs to be adept at talking about how he is moving one of his core areas of strategy forward, whether it's investment, whether it's innovation, in town halls, all hands meetings, shareholder meetings, it doesn't matter where it is. When the CEO makes it a top priority for the company, the rest of it falls much easier. And that philosophy or the practice can be adopted across any vertical in any industry.
Mikhail?
Mikhail, please. I would agree with the previous speaker. All protection solutions are good. But yes, if the CEO is not involved in this process by 100%, if this person does not understand the level of the threats, and if this person is not doing enough to prevent them, then the major problem will be there, that's for sure. Because IT programs and awareness-raising programs are good, but the human factor plays a key part. I never think twice when I to phone the FinCert head if I know that some attack is being planned, because I want everyone to be ready for that, to be ready for the battle. And some people do not think twice to call me and to say that there is a major attack that is being planned. And I think this is good. I think this human factor, this human cooperation and communication is the key. Nothing can replace that. And in conclusion, I would like to thank you, Mr. Kuznetsov, for providing this unique opportunity to meet together, because this is really an open and sincere, transparent discussion. We are also discussing many things during the coffee breaks. And, you know, these unofficial communications is sometimes even more important than the official ones. Daniela, please, major goal, major task.
Okay, I would say the most important thing is to test all stakeholder in the processes, test the processes, the applications, test your resilience, and then you will know where to put more security and what are the most critical elements of your systems.
Okay, thank you so much, Georgy Ivanovich.
Mr. Lontovsky. Well, as far as I understand, Mr. Kuznetsov is expecting me to say collaboration, the word that he really loves. Yes, I will say it. I, of course, agree with all the previous speakers, all the previous panelists, but I think that in cybersecurity, cybersecurity should really become a driver to unite efforts, to become some good thing that is generated by all the stakeholders, and it should be used by small banks and large banks and all the other organizations. So collaboration is the key word. Thank you so much. Well, colleagues, I would like to thank you so much for all that. But apart from saying the word collaboration and saying it is one of the major and critical elements, I would like to say that increasing trust is the top priority for me. I think that in cybersecurity, trust is the most critical element for me. It will help to drive up the cyber resilience, because I think trust is something that we do lack badly today. I am confident that we have built some trust on this panel between the panelists. I hope that we did some contribution to drive up the level of trust for this audience, and that means that our colleagues who are committed to this very important task of ensuring cybersecurity, it is very important. Trust is very important. So thank you so much for your insights, and thank you for your session.